You're listening to the A Lot of Like podcast, a podcast created for the overwhelmed entrepreneur to feel safe, seen, and supported through conversations around the not so common topics in business. My name is Miranda Joyner, a former radio personality turned podcaster. I'm a brand consultant, author, and speaker, and the co-founder of Succeed and Elevate, an organization dedicated to helping small business owners overcome burnout. In this podcast, we have candid conversations about the everyday struggles that entrepreneurs face and the real no-fluff solutions to help us overcome them. Good morning, and welcome to A Lot of Like, the podcast. My name is Miranda Joyner, and I'm your host/guide, and I'm excited to be here with you for another episode. So look, I love to change up my look. Okay. If you have caught my other podcasts, my hair has changed 3 times already. My glasses are here. They weren't here before. This is who I am. Okay. So you're going to get me in my fullness. I love to change my hair. And today we're doing the natural, and I love it. So I'm really excited about today's episode because it's the top of the year, first of all. And it is a very trendy topic. So I'm really excited to get into it. But before that, I want to tell those of you who may have never seen me before and not know anything about me, who I am. So my name is Miranda Joyner. I am a former radio personality. I have 14 plus years in radio. I have a degree in mass communications, which means essentially I have a lot of student loans and I know how to communicate, okay? And I also have curated events for over a decade, worked with small business owners and artists alike to help them to become the best versions of themselves. And in 2018, I quit my job to become a full-time entrepreneur. And more recently, I started running an organization to help small business owners and artists and creatives all to just overcome burnout and show up as a better version of themselves in the work that they do in this world. So I'm excited to be here to share with you all of the things that I've learned on that journey, all of the things collectively that I say to people in private, and they're like, Miranda, that was amazing. I needed that. It was exactly what I need. I have those moments often, and I decided to jump into my podcast to give you that in this space to help you become a better version of yourself as I continue to become a better version of myself, okay? So I don't have all the answers, but I would love to talk things out with you, and that's what we're here for. So today's episode, I'm excited to get into it because it's the beginning of the year here in the United States. I don't know where you're listening to this at, but we are starting the new year off. And what is everybody doing at the top of the year? I know they're in the gym. We're not talking about that. That's a whole nother episode for later about health and wellness. But most people at the top of every year are setting audacious goals. They're writing down and, all the things that they want to do, or they're telling people all the things that they want to do. And they're taking account to who they were last year and who they no longer want to be and who they're leaving in the old year and who they want to become in this new year. It is like a rat race to revitalize ourselves every top of the year. And so today I want to talk about goal setting, but I want to talk about it from a different angle. I want to talk about 3 reasons why your goals fail. And because there's so much info, and sometimes I tend to go left and right with my thoughts, I have notes here to keep me on track about what we're talking about. But today, just to give you a scope of where we're going with this episode, not only am I going to share with you 3 reasons why your goals fail, but I'm going to share with you some of the more common mistakes that people make. And I want to share with you 3 foundational things that I think you need based on what I've been experiencing and seeing that I think you need in order to achieve your goals and be more productive in the way that they come out, right? Most people set goals and they tend to kind of tinker off, and there are multiple reasons, and we're going to get into that. But I think there are some foundational things that most people never talk about from this perspective that are necessary in order for you to put the goals in place, execute them, and actually come close to achieving them or achieve them, right? Because one thing that we know about goals is that as life happens, sometimes our goals change. And that's okay. Sometimes what we set out to do in the beginning of the year isn't what we determine that is best for our lives or our situation. Circumstances change, life happens, and maybe your goals shift. And so I want us to learn how to be patient and kind with ourselves as we're going on this journey of being the best versions of ourselves, that we learn to give ourselves grace in that. So I want to get right into it. I want to talk about some statistics and all those good things. One last thing before we get into this episode, though, that I think is super important that I need you to do. I need you, if you are listening to this, maybe you're sitting on the toilet, maybe you're cooking, maybe you are washing dishes, you might be driving and listening to this. At some point, if you can stop what you're doing right now and hit the subscribe button on whatever you're watching. If you're listening to this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you are watching this, on your big screen, and it's connected to your YouTube, go to your phone and hit the subscribe button. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify or any of the other podcast platforms, please like and subscribe. It will help me to continue to bring you these episodes, and it'll let me know that this is content that you love. I would also love if you would leave me a comment or follow me on social media and leave me a comment there. That would be great as well. Okay. All right, sweet. Well, let's get into this episode. 3 reasons why your goals fail. The very first thing that I want to do is talk about the importance of goal setting. I think one of the things that we've learned and research shows that setting goals and having goals gives people a sense of purpose. It lowers our stress. It helps us to feel more accomplished in life. A lot of times when people are walking around without goals, they feel sadder and more depressed, and like they're kind of living in the routine of maybe doing the same things, and they might not be as fulfilled or satisfied with their lives in general, right? When you think about people as a whole, when you run into people that are usually experiencing, spouts of feeling like they don't have purpose or like they don't have meaning in life, a lot of times they haven't set goals in their lives, that they have nothing that they're moving towards or working towards. And then, to be honest, there's the flip side. There's the time where people are setting too many goals. And it's stressing them out. And they're doing too much and they're exhausted and they're feeling overwhelmed. And so you really want to be careful about being on one side of the scale or the other. So it's about finding that balance. But what research has shown is that most people who have goals and are moving towards obtaining these goals feel a sense of purpose and accomplishment in their lives. And I always like to say that goals are things to set as markers in our lives, and that it doesn't necessarily mean that at the end of the day, sometimes it's really not about reaching the goal, but it's about the journey on the way to the goals. It's about the way that that journey changes us. It's about the way that we treat people on the way to those goals. It's about what we learn about ourselves and about others as we're obtaining these goals in our lives. How does it expand us? How does it grow us? How does it, pour into who we are as human beings, makes us softer and more loving and more compassionate, right? How can we obtain things that make us better at showing up in this world and interacting with those around us as we're obtaining these goals? How are we, you know, building teams around us? How are we pouring into those teams, et cetera, et cetera? I could go on and on. But I want you to think about that as you're setting goals, because what I found is that when I talk to so many people about goals, they get so caught up in the outcome that they forget to just enjoy the process. They get so caught up in the what they want to be a successful outcome in the situation, that it has to work, that they forget that everything in life is just about the one moment that you're in. It's about how you're behaving or acting or interacting with people in that moment. What are you doing with the minutes that you have in that moment? Because that's what matters in that moment. And, this might sound a bit morbid, but let's say, God forbid, something happens to you and you don't obtain that goal. Realistically, all you have is everything you've done up until that moment. And so we want to live each moment as if it is what counts, because it is what counts as we obtain these goals. So I want us to keep that in mind as we're feeling the pressure to do so many things and be so many things to so many people, that we take time to slow down and be present in those moments. Okay. All right. So, one of the statistics that they say about people in goal setting is that more than 80% of people give up on their goals. And it's such a common thing. Like every year, we have the same narrative about people going into the gym in droves, right? And every year, it's the same narrative about, people trying to be a new year. What is it? New year, new me thing that people are always saying. And so there's always the extreme that we get on this bandwagon at the beginning of the year. And typically, because we put so much on ourselves, by the time March rolls around, people are looking around like, "What goals? What goals? Ooh, okay." So to prevent you from being that type of person, I want us to take a look and really unpack some foundational things tonight, or today, that we could talk about to help you to achieve your goals. So let's get into it. One of the things that I think people tend to ask me quite often, how do you juggle so much? Right. And I think I might be on the spectrum that I was talking about earlier, the side where somebody that sets a little bit too many goals. Okay. I might be guilty of being that type of person. And so a lot of times I have a lot of things on my to do list. I often call my to do list an evergreen list because it is always present, it is always happening. And when I scratch one thing off, there are several things that pop up at the bottom. But I do juggle quite a lot. And sometimes it may come across that I kind of have things together. And then my meltdowns that I have, I absolutely have at home. My disconnect, when I detach, when I scroll on social media mindlessly, or when I lean into a series on Netflix because my brain feels a little overfried and I'm a little burnt out from dealing with people or talking to people or doing events or being present, or when someone invites me to an event and then I have every intention of going, I have a desire to go, but my body is just like, nah, let's just stay at home, right? For me, I get in those spaces sometimes where I have too many goals or things that I have on the plate on my plate that I'm doing, and I get into a space of burnout. Okay. Burnout is a whole nother topic. I'll have a whole nother podcast about that in the future. But sometimes I get overwhelmed because I have too many goals or too many things that I'm trying to do at once on my plate. And so even though that's happening and that's a thing from the outside, sometimes what I have done as a marketing and branding person, I think I have managed to look like I have things really rolling and going. I have perfected, sometimes we trick ourselves and have perfected the appearance of having it together. Amen. Can anybody else relate? We have perfected the appearance of it seeming like we have everything together and that we are just rolling right along and there are no issues. Okay. But when in reality, behind the scenes, it's like the Wizard of Oz, right? It's a little bit of chaos, it's controlled chaos. And so let me give you some of the things that I do. I'm a mom, first of all, and we know that's a whole job. So I'm a mother to a teenager who is shifting into adulthood, right? So that's a thing. I host an open mic that I've been running for the last 10 plus years, that I run an open mic with artists and creatives. I run a podcast, right? So now I have a podcast that I'm doing on a regular basis now that I've picked that goal up of this year, moving into this year, starting last year. My goal is to be consistent with this podcast and to not just record 5 episodes and then drop it. I think this is episode number 4. So we're going to see how that goes. I do events from time to time. And so events are a thing that's happening. I do speaking engagements. I have products that I'm working on. I had a goal of doing a course. Shamefully, I'm not going to tell you how long I've been working on this course or trying to put out a course. We're just going to move on to the next thing. But I have a an organization that I am a co-founder of, that works with small business owners, and that's a thing within itself. There's programming, there's managing teams, there is the organization of the events and our marketing. I could go on and on about the things that I have on my to-do list on a daily basis. And my to-do list, a long time ago, I started categorizing my to-do list. My to-do list had categories, right? It would have personal, it would be different projects that I was working on. And this doesn't include the work that sometimes comes up with my clients that I'm working with, and so on and so on. And one of the things that I think have helped me through it is really setting goals and some of the things I'm going to share with you today. And I'm really excited to get into it. So let's just roll right into it for the sake of time because it's a lot to get in. And I really don't want this podcast to be an hour long. I'm committed also. One of my goals with this podcast is to make it a 30-minute podcast. Okay. And we're already almost halfway there. So let's get into one of the things that we hear often when it comes to goal setting. I think most of us, if you're in the space of entrepreneurship, if you're in the space of managing a team or any type of like self help guru space from the books to the people, you've heard the term setting SMART goals, right? Of course, SMART goals, which are specific. If you didn't know, it's the word SMART. And they all have a word associated with the letter here, okay? Specific goals, measurable goals, achievable goals, relevant goals, and goals that have a time bond, right? And some of the things, and if you've never heard of that, write it down because it really is a good gauge and way to measure your goals, right? But that's not what I'm about to unpack, right? What I want to talk to you about is what I feel like based in that. I want to kind of unpack some of those things and talk about the things that I see as a common roadblock for people who are trying to obtain goals. Some of the biggest mistakes that I see people make, some of the mistakes that I have made in the past when it comes to setting goals and obtaining them. I want to kind of unpack some of those things. So if you have never heard of SMART goals, just look it up, check it out. That's something that you can kind of put in your pocket and pull out to use as a measuring stick for your goals. Um, so before we get into the big mistakes that people make, because that's what I'm about to talk to you about, the big mistakes that people make when setting their goals, I want to talk to you about the categories that I think most people should set goals in, right? So what are these categories? Earlier, not too long ago, a few minutes ago, I was talking to you about how people, and by people I mean sometimes me, set too many goals, right? And so I think one of the things that before we get into the mistakes that I see people making is to think about not setting so many goals and to thinking about the categories in our lives in which we can set our goals in. Something about our brain, once we start to categorize things and put them and organize them, then it begins to make sense. It flows so much better. Have you ever had so many ideas and thoughts moving around in your head? And then the moment you sat down with a pen and paper, or maybe on a dry erase board, and wrote all these ideas out across the dry erase board, then all of a sudden you felt this sense of relief. You felt physically lighter, probably mentally and emotionally lighter. Things started to make sense. Clarity started to come. You would think that people would do this more often, as relieving as it is to actually dump your ideas and your thoughts on a dry erase board or on paper. But people really don't take the time to slow down and do this. Okay. So I want you to think about three categories that you could set goals in so that as you start to make these categories in your head, it'll help you to organize how you move towards these goals. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. I hope you're taking notes. So, one of the first categories that I think people set goals in when we think about the three categories in life that people set goals in, one of them is health and wellness. What are the goals that you're setting under the health and wellness space? I think health is a major concern for most people, especially in this country, especially when the cost of food is high and we feel like the quality of food has gone down. There's so many talks around food and juicing and just being a healthier and better you that the health industry is really booming. And to be honest, sometimes in some cases, it's taking advantage of us as we're going on these health journeys, trying to become healthier human beings. So health and wellness is one category. The next one is family and friends. Okay. People are really concerned about their relationships with their family and with their friends. And when you ask people what's the most important thing to them, most people are going to either mention their parents or their children, right? When I interview or talk to entrepreneurs or work with my entrepreneurs, that question comes up about what's the most important thing to you. The most common response is either their parents or their children. So family and friends is another category to think about pouring into. And the ironic thing about that is that most of us spend so much time working to provide for our kids or our parents. Maybe if you're a caregiver and having to take care of your parents, most of us spend so much time working to provide for them financially that we forget to intentionally do the things that really matter with them, like slow down and listen or spend time. I was talking to someone the other day and we were sitting across the room, and as I was talking, they were talking and I was fully attentive and listening. And then the moment I started responding and talking, no lie, every time they picked up their phone and they were on the phone. And it wasn't because what I was saying didn't have value, because my words have value. It was simply because they weren't present in that moment. And that tends to matter a lot when you're present with your children, when you're present with your loved ones, when you're, showing up and giving someone your full attention. That's a different type of energy that you're experiencing. I remember this one time my clients, I had these two clients, they were nurses and they were looking to shift into the holistic space, the whole the health space online. They wanted to create an herb, I think it was like a it was some type of health store to where basically they were giving people alternative resources to medicine. And in the conversation, as we were unpacking the reason that they wanted to do this, one of the ladies said that, over and over again, when people were on their deathbed and they were talking to them, the most common regret that they heard people say was that they wish they had spent less time working and more time investing and pouring into the people that they love and present with loved ones. And I remember, I will never forget that as long as I live, that what they felt like was the most important as they were taking their last breaths was spending time with family and friends. And they wish they had done more of it because they felt like they worked too much. So I just want you to think about that as you're thinking about setting goals under the family and friend space. And then, of course, the last space, as I say this, right? Because it is going to sound like I'm being like I'm contradicting myself, but I'm not. Because the reality is that everybody pretty much works for a living, and a lot of people wrap up their identity and feel a sense of purpose through the work that they do in this world. And if you're lucky and fortunate enough to do something that you love, then it isn't as taxing if you can learn how to find some type of balance between working and doing what you love and still spending time with your loved ones. But the third category is career. What you do, how you show up in this world. This is a category that a lot of people set goals in. It's just, usually it's the leading category, and it's also why I put it last. Okay. I feel like health and wellness should be first, friends and family, and then career. I purposely put it in that order. All right. So now that we have the three categories that we want to set goals under, let's get into the biggest mistakes that people make when it comes to setting goals. One of the first mistakes that I see, the most common mistake that is stopping us from achieving our goals, is that we don't write goals down. We do not write them down. There is something very magical that happens about writing goals down. It makes it real, it makes it tangible. I remember when I was seeing a therapist one time, and we were talking about some issue that I was having around, I think it was around like love and receiving love. And one of the assignments that she gave me was to go home and to write in my journal a specific sentence about love with my non-dominant hand, which is my left hand. Now I'm right-handed. And she wanted me to write this sentence with my non-dominant hand. And I remember the intensity of everything in my body was focused on putting this sentence into existence on this paper. And I remember the power in that moment of thinking, the energy and intention in which I'm putting into bringing this thing to life it felt tangible. And so I think there's really something powerful. And statistics and studies show that, only 3% of the world population write their goals down. And the and the saying and the quote that I found about this, it says, "And the rest of the world works for them." That these are the people that are out there achieving their goals. And so I want to encourage you to not just write your goals down one time and move away from them, but to write them down constantly on a weekly basis, to go back and revisit, to write them down on Post-it notes, to have them visible, to exercise your ability to constantly see and put these things on paper. Okay. The second biggest mistake that I see people make when it comes to goal setting is setting vague goals, okay? Not being specific. That was one of the SMART options, right? So being very specific about your goal. What is it that you want to achieve? Sometimes we speak in general, like we can always go to weight loss, right? And say, I want to lose weight, right? Well, what does that look like? Losing weight in a general sense. I want to lose weight. How much weight do you want to lose? Specifically, is it the actual weight that you want to lose? Do you just want to look better in your clothes? We've learned over the years that sometimes that scale means absolutely nothing if your body isn't shaped the way you want it to be shaped. So maybe you're trying to look a certain way in clothes. You're trying to feel a certain way. Maybe there are targeted parts of your body that you're wanting to minimize or, expand. So what is the specific weight journey that you're wanting to go on? Get specific about it and don't be afraid to be specific. The third thing that I see as the biggest mistake is not giving a due date to your goals. Not giving a due date. Okay? I don't know what it is about people scared to put a date on it. Well, I do know because that's going to be one of the three things we're going to get to. One of the three things that is foundational, I feel like, for helping you to not make these mistakes. I'm going to get to that in a minute. But people are scared to put a due date on things. You say give it a due date, people get instant anxiety. Like in the goal setting sessions that I've been in, when I tell people to give it a date, they go vague. Even after I said, don't give vague goals. I said, now give me a due date. They'll go, well, March. Okay, March what? Or this year or the spring or fall, right? Give it a specific due date. And here's the thing. If you set a goal for a specific date and you get to this date and the goal doesn't happen, guess what? You can just change the date. You have the authority to decide that, let's just push this date up. Again, it goes back to it's about the journey and about the process. So give yourself the grace to be able to achieve and obtain those goals. The next mistake that I see people making is not breaking bigger goals down into smaller goals. Listen. Listen. We can set the destination and say, this is where we're going with this goal. This is what I'm doing. This is what I want to achieve on the big scale. This is the grand idea. This is the big picture. What does that look like? Dream big. I want to encourage us to dream big because too many of us don't dream big enough, right? So dream big, set the goal, but then come back to this moment and ask yourself, what is the next step to get towards that goal? And then even break it down even further to think about what are the next 3 steps to get to that goal, right? What do I need to do? Who do I need to be connected to? What are the components that are necessary to make this? I think this goes back to in the SMART thing, making it obtainable and accessible. How do you make this accessible? How do you obtain this? So one of the bigger mistakes that people make is they do not set smaller steps to get to the goal. They throw the rod out into the ocean and they're trying to catch the whale with the small fishing rod. And that's not how that works. You have to think bit by bit. How do I, chunk this down one at a time, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. All right. So I think it's very, very important for you to go back to this moment after you set the big goal, write it down on paper very specifically, and then come back to this moment and say, what is the next thing that I need to do? What can I do tomorrow to move me towards it? And sometimes that looks like picking up a book. Sometimes that looks like turning on a podcast. Sometimes it looks like renewing your mind and changing your mindset about what it is you're doing. Sometimes it looks like reaching out to a person that you know that's doing the thing that you want to do and asking them questions. Or sometimes it looks like observing people who are doing the thing that you want to do and asking them questions. It doesn't always have to look so grand. It's not always an Instagrammable moment that gets you to the bigger goal. A lot of times, people who are achieving major goals are doing a number of small things in the background that never are visible to us to be successful. All right. So keep that in mind. Breaking your bigger goals down into small goals. Nobody is successfully running anything without doing a ton of other small steps to get to it. Okay? Keep that in mind. So you cannot just go to sleep and wake up in the morning and be famous. It's not how that works. It's not how it works. All right. All right. So I hope this was helpful. I want to pause here for a moment. We've said a lot to process some of those things. I want you to think about your goals that you're obtaining. I want you to think about those categories, right? Under health and wellness, under friends and family, and under career. And I want you to take a moment and think about some goals that you would like to set in those spaces. And then I want you to not try to overwhelm yourself with a ton of goals and think about the few goals that you can set in those spaces. What are the few smaller down to if you're thinking about 5 or 6, bring it in a little bit, okay? All right. So think about those goals and how you can do it. Then I want you to not make those mistakes. Do the opposite of what I said. Write it down, okay? Set specific goals. Give a specific due date, and then come up with a plan. What are the next steps? What are 2 to 3 things you can do today or tomorrow to move you closer to that goal? And what are the steps to get there as far out as you can think? And sometimes I just want to say this as a caveat that you can't always completely see the full plan, that you have to maybe do the next 3 steps. And then a lot of times when you get to that 3rd step, it reveals itself. Trust me, that's the way this world works. You get there and go, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do next. So keep that in mind. So here are, as I promised, what I feel like are 3 foundational things that I feel like are stopping you from achieving your goal. I feel like this is the reason that goals fail, because all this information that I just gave you is out here. And a lot of times I see some people executing these things and still not reaching their goals or still failing. Or still coming up short or giving up, really. Because to me, failure doesn't equate to you not reaching that goal. Failure is you just saying, I'm done altogether and not doing anything, becoming complacent and moving backwards and regressing. So I want to talk to you about what I feel like are the foundational things you need in order for your goals to stick. And for you to stick with goals. And what I mean by stick with goals, I mean is you set a goal, and if that goal changes, you set another goal, that you're goal-oriented and moving through life with purpose. The first thing is, I think most people who set goals don't have or understand why they're setting the goal. So it needs to be something that is personal, that is connected to you. You need to have some sense of purpose and meaning into what this goal means to you. Why is it important to you to do this? Why are you doing this now in your life? And, why is it important? That is a very, very important thing to ask yourself about any goal that you set. What is the reason? What is the why? Okay. The second thing that I think is foundational for goals to stick is what I just said before, which was making a plan. Okay. When we talked about breaking bigger goals down into smaller goals, people don't make a plan for how they reach these goals. So many times I see people come up with an idea and they're just like, let's do it. I was meeting with these artists recently. And one of the guys in the meetings was like, I don't like to do all this talking. Like, I don't want to do all this talking. I just want to get to it. And I remember being extremely shocked that a creative or an artist who, honestly, I had watched and it seemingly, them accomplish goals, had this mindset to say, I don't want to do all this talking. We just need to do without any plan, any sitting down and determining direction, where we were going, what were our goals, what were we trying to do, that they just want to do the work. But this person in particular they're not uncommon. So many times I see people come up with an idea and then they hit the ground running without any preparation, any strategy, any direction, no GPS. We're just going. And what happens is they end up spinning their wheels in a circle and not really going anywhere. Now, I also want to be clear. Sometimes people really don't want to have major goals, right? They just want to do what they love doing and they want to do that. And that's perfectly fine. Like there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're trying to achieve something in life, or you on the back end, or somewhere deep down inside, you have this desire to obtain something, right? First, you got to define it and understand what it is you're trying to do and why, right? And then the next thing is to make a plan for how to obtain it. If not, you're just going to be doing a bunch of random things. And over the years, I cannot explain to you how many situations where I've seen where people are just randomly doing stuff, randomly doing podcasts, randomly doing events, randomly. And when you get to them, when you see them, when you feel them, it feels random. It doesn't feel like they have any direction or purpose. People feel that. So I think it's very important for you to make a plan and figure out how you're going to move towards it, and come up with some type of strategy. Okay. And then the last thing that I think is foundational and needed for people to obtain and create goals that stick is, and this one I think is not as common as all the other things we've said today. It is managing and facing the fear that you have around failure. I think most people tinker out on their goals because at some point, based on all the things that we've talked about here, that some point something didn't click. They didn't make a plan. They weren't specific about their goal, and something gave them the signal that, oh, we might not obtain this goal. And out of fear of failure, most people quit and give up on their whatever they're shooting for. And I think a lot of us have this overwhelming fear of judgment and failing and being judged because of failure. And I think it's very unfortunate because the reality is that failure is just a part of the process, that if we could fail in private on our own, we would do it more often. And that failure really is just data and information. It's just telling us that this isn't the route to take and to do something different. And when we really fail at something, it's really because we gave up on it, not because it didn't work. And I'm not really sure at what point or when we started identifying with failure, like when failure happens to us, that we take it on as our identity. But I really want us to stop. I want us to learn how to manage that fear and how to push through it, and to understand that failure is when you walk away and say, I'm not even going to try. That failure is not when you attempt to do a thing and it doesn't work. Because all that is simply saying, keep trying, try something else, that this isn't the way. So I want to encourage you to learn how to manage your fear around you not obtaining a goal, to not quit and give up if weight loss or if something is out there that you're trying to obtain and it seems to give pushback or challenge, that is the definition of moving towards goals. That by definition, a goal is you doing something. And as you move in momentum towards a thing, there's going to be resistance. So expect it and just keep pushing forward past it so that you can continue to live in a sense of purpose. But I want you to take into account all the things that we talked about today. I want you to take into account the categories in which to make goals with. And I want you to take into account the biggest mistakes that people make so that you don't make those mistakes. I hope this was helpful. I want to take a moment right now in this podcast and pause and give you an opportunity to think about 5 goals that you might have for this year coming up. I want you to think about 5 different goals that you could set. Now, when I do this in person, I normally ask people to give me 10, and they go 10 in their Soulja Boy voice, right? But I want you to think of 5 goals for me for the sake of time on this podcast. 5 goals. And if you want to pause right here, you want to pause the podcast, you can do that. Or if you want to do this at a later date, you can. But I want you to think of 5 goals that you have for this year. And then out of those 5 goals, I want you to pick the 3 most important goals. And hopefully that you have a goal under each category: health and wellness, family and friends, and career. Pick one goal that falls under each one of those categories. And then come back and do the things that we talked about. 1, write it down. Be specific about it. Give a due date for them. And then make a plan of action of how you're going to get to it. Break it down into smaller, obtainable goals as you move towards it. Okay? So do that right now, or do that at a later date. Put an alarm or a timer in your phone to remind you to write your goals down and make this happen. I hope this episode was very helpful about you and obtaining goals. And I just want to remind you that it is not about the destination. It is absolutely about the journey. Okay? If you have thoughts or feedback, I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear from you. So follow me on social media or comment below if you're watching on YouTube. Give me your feedback about this and inbox me. I am Miranda Joyner on all platforms: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram a lot. So I would love for you to jump into my DMs or my inbox and tell me what you think about this episode. If it was great for you, then please share it with a friend. Share it, like it, and subscribe. If you have not already subscribed to this podcast, I would love for you to do that. Now, I have some recommendations that I want to give you for before I roll out. I want to give you an app recommendation for managing your goals and a book recommendation for you. It is a repeat book recommendation because it is just that good. The app recommendation is Trello. I use Trello to manage all of my projects. I create boards, I create categories. It really helps me with brain dump. And Trello is not paying me, but I just think it's a fabulous app for project management. But also it's a great app for me to manage and categorize my goals. Because if you go into my personal Trello, when my project manager first opened it, she said, "This is a lot, Miranda. It gives me anxiety." But it's categorized. Okay. So I got my thoughts out of my head and into some type of organization. Trello is a great app for that. I'm sure if you have another app recommendation, please leave it below in the comments. And then the book is Atomic Habits by James Clear. Just a great book for you to get into the habit of picking up good habits and putting down bad ones. It's a really great read for that. So check out that book as well. All right. So I love it. This has been great. I am looking forward to catching up with you in the next episode. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. And in the meantime, in between time, I hope you have an amazing goal-crushing year. Okay? Please be kind, be loving, be patient with yourself. And thanks for tuning in to A Lot of Like. I'll see you on the next episode. Hey. A Lot of Like is recorded at KD Creative Arts Media Studio in Jackson, Mississippi. If you're interested in taking your video and audio quality to the next level, reach out to the people here at KD Creative Arts Media Studio. And if you want to grow and monetize your podcast and take it to the next level, this is the place to be. Visit kdcreativearts.com today.